In 1916, His Majesty King George V decided that henceforth the British royal family should be known as the House of Windsor, a decision which linked up our royalty with a castle whose associations with the Crown go back to the beginnings of English history. The first king of the House of Windsor ruled as monarch of Great Britain, of the dominions overseas, and as King Emperor of India for over 25 years. It is fitting that we should begin our story by reviving memories of the world-famous Jubilee celebrations in May 1935, and of the magnificent climax when King George and Queen Mary drove in state to St. Paul's, there to give thanks to God for the achievements of a reign of 25 years. And what years they were, of hope and despair, joys and sorrow, drama and crisis. As the King and Queen drove in perfect May weather through enormous and wildly enthusiastic crowds, swelled by visitors from all parts of the earth, an empire remembered that this man and his wife had carried the burden of the responsibilities of the highest office in the land through a period which had witnessed the bitter years of war, 1914 to 1918, upheaval and crisis abroad, and the years of slump and gradual recovery at home and in our dominions and colonies. During the close of his reign, it was his happy custom to speak to his people each Christmas through the medium of the radio, and he perfectly expressed his own attitude towards the onerous duties to which he was called when, in his broadcast to his peoples at Christmas 1932, he said,
"Through one of the marvels of modern science, I am enabled this day to speak to all my peoples throughout the empire. My life's aim has been to serve. Your loyalty, your confidence in me has been my abundant reward. I speak now from my home and from my heart to you all, to men and women so cut off by the snows, the desert, or the sea, that only voices out of the air can reach them. To all, to each, God bless you."
It was on the night of January the 20th, 1936, that a listening world heard the news that the King's life was drawing peacefully to its close, and the joys and happiness with which the nation and the empire had celebrated the Silver Jubilee was replaced by a profound sense of personal loss. A king is dead. Long live the king. King George V was succeeded on the throne by his eldest son, who took the title of King Edward VIII. For reasons still fresh in everyone's mind, and which form one of the strangest and in some ways most tragic pages in English history, King Edward VIII, after a reign which lasted for less than 11 months, executed a voluntary act of abdication and was succeeded on the throne by his brother the Duke of York, who assumed the title of King George VI. On December the 14th, 1895, Albert Frederick Arthur George was born at York Cottage, Sandringham, the second son of the then Duke and Duchess of York. Like his father before him, he was destined for the Navy. At the beginning of 1913, he passed out of the Royal Naval College at Dartmouth, where he had spent the previous 2 years, and was appointed to the training cruiser Cumberland. In that ship, he learned to keep watch both above and below decks, and a 4-hour spell in the stokehold with a slice and shovel was no Blinkin picnic. When the Great War broke out, the young Duke was serving afloat, and attended his father when King George V inspected the Grand Fleet at Scapa Flow. As an officer in HMS Collingwood, one of the ships in the battle squadron, he took part in the periodical sweeps made by the fleet into the North Sea in search of the German high seas fleet. But on the 31st of May 1916, the two fleets met in the historic Battle of Jutland. Here the British battleships are firing salvos. our king went through this battle in the A turret of the Collingwood. Within the armour-plated depths of such a turret as this, the king and some 40 companions operated the complicated mechanism of modern fire control. The battle fleet, of whose line the Collingwood was one of the units, was subjected to torpedo fire by the attacks of the massed German flotilla. In 1917, he was transferred to the Royal Naval Air Service, and his company is being inspected by King George V. In 1918, when the Royal Air Force was formed, our king took up an appointment at the front in France. Here he is with his father and elder brother. After the war, it was decided to erect naval memorials at each of the home ports. 8 years after Jutland, the king went to Portsmouth to unveil the recently completed memorial. And as he carried out that sad duty, his mind must have been carried back to the drama of Jutland, in which he had played a part for which he was mentioned in dispatches by the Commander-in-Chief, Sir John Jellicoe. Twice during the war, the king's health broke down, and he was temporarily invalided. When possible, he helped at fetes and other activities organized for war purposes. At one of these, George Robey stands up gallantly to the king's gunnery, which fails to score a direct hit, or has the wily George insisted that the balls must be thrown with the left hand. Here at Cambridge after the war, honorary degrees were being presented to distinguished personalities. Lloyd George, Bonar Law, Sir Austin Chamberlain and Lord Beatty are amongst those seen in this picture. In 1923, the whole nation rejoiced to learn that the Duke of York, as our king was then, had proposed to Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyons, the daughter of the Earl and Countess of Strathmore, whose home was at historic Glamis Castle. The marriage took place at Westminster Abbey, and enormous and enthusiastic crowds wished Godspeed and good luck to the happy couple as they drove to and from the Abbey. The fact that our present king was the first of George V's sons to be married, coupled with his choice of a bride from amongst his own people, were both circumstances which added greatly to the national pleasure on this occasion. An immense and cheering crowd waited for the young couple to appear on the historic balcony overlooking the courtyard of Buckingham Palace, and they were not disappointed. First, the Duke and Duchess of York, as they then were, showed themselves to the cheering multitude. Then they were joined by Queen Mary, a few moments later by the rest of the royal family. The honeymoon over, the royal couple began a long series of public engagements. Here our king is with Baden Powell and the Boy Scouts. In this picture, our queen is at York for the unveiling of the famous Five Sisters window at York Minster. The Caledonian Festival at Bushey, and the queen watches the Highland dancing with a critical and appreciative eye. Later, the formalities were pleasantly softened by the delightfully natural behavior of the small children, to whom our